Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. Today is like a thrill for me. I get to do things and talk to people that really, really excite me. And today I'm fangirling with these two women because they have written a book that it's changing my life. I think everyone should be reading this. And let's all hold up copies. I'm sure you guys have yours there too, right?
I do. Hold on.
Hold it up.
What?
Yeah. This is a book that is, in a world where it can be scary to ask questions and not know if we're doing something the right way. We have been given a gift by Rosalind and Shanterra, where they are really, every example in the book was something that had happened to me. It was a little, I thought you were maybe, had cameras in my house or something. Anyway, I really recommend it. And we have a few books. So if you would email editor@yourteenmag.com, we will give those books out. So I'm going to just give you their bio because they've earned it. Shanterra McBride is an author, preacher, speaker, and teacher. She is the founder of Marvelous University, a social enterprise that offers life coaching and success planning for young people, specializing in leadership development for girls and young women. She works with young people of all backgrounds, as well as with adults seeking to become better trusted allies in the lives of the young people they interact with. Beautiful. Rosalind Wiseman is a multiple New York Times bestselling author whose publications include Queen Bees and Wannabes, and most of us probably know that book because it led to the movie Mean Girls, and Masterminds and Wingmen. Rosalind is the co-founder of Cultures of Dignity, and I don't know how people do this, but Rosalind and Shanterra co-authored this book. I don't know how co-authoring works, but again, highly recommend the book. So we're going to move into my questions, which probably are about 4 times too long. So hopefully we'll finish up the questions in a podcast at Your Team with Sue and Steph. So I just want to start with how impossible these conversations can feel about race. And, we can be in a classroom or in a meeting or in our home with guests, and it's so much easier to just let it go because it feels so uncomfortable to go there. So what do you say to all of us when that bubbles up inside of us? Like, I want to keep peace at the moment over discomfort.
I could start. First of all, thank you so much for having us. This is a real treat for me because I follow you on social media. So this is a real treat. And I think there are 2 answers. So one part about keeping the peace, peace is important. I'm all about self-care. You should see my room and candles and incense and, I journal and all the self-care things, right? But at some point, sometimes the self-care, and I know there are memes on social media, especially on Instagram, self-care is not selfish. I totally agree. But self-care, this idea of self-care can also be a disguise for not wanting to be uncomfortable. And so in that place of, am I taking care of myself? Am I trying to keep the peace? Because sometimes keeping the peace means, let me say something because my peace is bothered. I'm not feeling peaceful right now because this stuff keeps happening. And so I'm not at peace because I won't say anything. And so I think that there are 2 ways to look at self-care. Sometimes we use it as a disguise for not wanting to take anything, and I'm protecting my peace. But sometimes the peace that's really bothered is the peace within because we didn't say anything. So I think there are 2 separate things.
And I would answer your question, Sue, about is it that I want to keep the peace, or is that I'm too afraid for good reasons, for understandable reasons? Am I too afraid to upend the power relationship between the people? And am I afraid to speak out because I think relationships are going to really fracture? Mm-hmm. And because I think what we do is we have peace, but really it's not peace, it's actually silence. And one of the things that Shanterra and I wanted to do in this book is to give, give people the skills to be able to say in that moment, let me track the way I'm feeling. Like, let me just not bury it, but let me track how I'm feeling. And let me do that breath that Shanterra just did. And let me think about what are the costs of speaking out right now, and what are the costs of maybe speaking out later, and then having a matrix of decision making that gets you to the place where, maybe you don't speak in that moment, but you take a breath and you are mindful of it, and you say, I'm not actually going to be silent the whole time. I'm going to keep the peace right now, but I'm going to go to that person and I'm going to talk to them about what happened. And then we talk about, what do you say? Which is basically something like, hey, can I talk to you for a moment? This is really uncomfortable for me to talk about. And maybe, you're an important important person in my life. You're an important part of my child's life. But what you said back there was it really just took away the dignity of everyone in that room. And I want to be able to talk to you about it. Is that okay? And so, it has to be sort of in your own words, it can't be exactly the way Shanterra and I are talking to you about, this is how you say it. We're giving you guidelines, but we have to start with some amount of words, and we have to start with some amount of self-awareness and acknowledgement about what's happening. And then we can ask the hard question that Shanterra just asked us. Am I doing self-care or am I running away? And then go through the process of getting ourselves ready and then having the conversation with the person.
I love the permission to not do it in the moment, because the moment might not be the right time. It really might be too disruptive. And if we want to be effective advocates, that might not be the best advocacy. So I love that permission to say, have some rubric in your mind. And it doesn't mean you never talk about it. It just means maybe at that moment, as your heart is racing and you're not sure what to do, you say, well, now's not the best time. So I think that's fantastic. So on a different, same idea of, but let's say I'm the one who is trying so hard to have these conversations, but I'm getting it wrong. So that can lead to me personally, and I think other people as well, being reluctant to go into those conversations, not because I want to point out someone else's misstep, but because I'm afraid that I'm misstepping.
Yeah.
Sue, let me ask a question, just clarifying question, because there's a couple places we can get it wrong, or that we're on the path to figuring out how to do it better.
You are one mind with two people.
We are totally speaking. Go ahead, Ross. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's see. We should do that. You should. Yeah. So my question back to you, Sue, is, are you talking about mistakes that you can make with people of color where you put say something where you're like, or you realize later that you've made a mistake? Or are you talking about somebody who has said something that is racist and bigoted, discriminatory, and you want to say something to them? So in my mind, there's some principles actually for both of them that are the same. But in my mind, it's helpful to actually distinguish between the two of what am I worried about when I'm talking to in this situation? And then what am I worried about when I'm talking about that situation? Did I say, was that what you were thinking about, Shanterra?
Well, I was going to say, what does it mean to get it wrong? But yeah.
Well, that's a much more distinct way to say it.
That is such a good question. So I thought in my head that the first question was covering your second option, and that the second question is about us wanting to talk about race or be engaged in a space related to race and not knowing, or even having experienced either from people of color coming back at us with that was a little hurtful or whatever it was, or our kids who maybe look at us and think we're, way outdated in our approach. But what I guess I almost feel like, Shanterra, that your question is so interesting. What does it mean getting it wrong? And I guess what it means is that I feel bad when someone is critical of what was such a genuine effort to do it well, to connect.
Yeah, I think that, and with a lot of stuff, and I know I'm one to do, I'll do the whole conversation script in my head, and I have my line and I know what the other person is supposed to say, and then I know what I'm supposed to, and then when they don't do that, when they don't follow the script in my head, then I feel like, oh no, this isn't going great. This isn't going well. And I think a lot of times saying something, because we are critical of ourselves instead of waiting on the other person to be critical of us. So even if you say, hey, what you just said was not treating that person with dignity, what can the other person say? Right? They could say, well, you don't know what they did. And then we all of a sudden feel like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have said anything. No. they can say something in return, but that doesn't mean what you said wasn't the right thing. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times we have this internal script of how it's supposed to go. And we talk a lot about this in the book of how don't say what we wrote, because that'll be weird. That'll be if you're holding the book and like, okay, this is my line. And then, hold on, because then we get thrown off when they don't say exactly what we have prepared in our heads for them to say. But if you just say, hey, what you just said, or what that wasn't right. That wasn't true. Trust me, I have met very few people who lead with not treating people with dignity, who are racist, who talk with microaggressions, who do that. Well, not microaggressions, but who are not intent on treating people with dignity, who don't know that they're not being kind and they're not that they're not treating people with dignity. So a person saying something, an ally saying, what you just said wasn't right, the other person either truly did not know that that wasn't cool and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, right? Or they will make an excuse for their bad behavior.
Or
when people say I don't want,
you.
or they're arguing, but they're arguing because they've been called out. But I've met very few, but people, this idea, Sue, of getting it right, of not wanting to be wrong. It's that it isn't real. It's this internal fear that we have that we're just like, oh no, but what if I say something and then they get mad? We're more concerned with protecting the offender than we are when we are offended.
And I would look at getting it right as actually having the conversation instead of doing it perfectly.
Ta-da.
Getting it right is being in relationship with people. And getting it right is putting yourself forward in all different kinds of ways. This topic just makes people even more worried about the mistakes and what that means in a relationship. But it's really important to actually redefine what it means to getting it right. And so getting it right is being in relationship. Getting it right is about being able to have difficult conversations. Getting it right is about, if I feel bad, that I have the skills to figure out why I feel bad and that I can put those things to words so that I understand it better for myself. Getting it right is when you're in a conversation with a person, if they argue with you or they, dismiss it, that you can say, you have the skills to be able to say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to now tell them the 5 reasons why they were wrong. I'm not going to feel like I'm getting into a battle with them. I'm not going to feel like I have to prove with something I saw on my social media feed why I'm right and why they're wrong. That is actually making mistakes. That is actually doing it wrong, because there is no way that person is going to leave the conversation feeling like they were acknowledged, they were seen, they were treated with dignity, and they're not going to listen to anything that you say, which is not, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this, is, well, that's justification for not even trying. It's getting it right is being in the relationship, managing yourself, and really having the capacity to be able to say, this is what this was like for me. This is what I observed. This is the impact of what I'm thinking is happening, and staying in relationship with people, and to the extent that your boundaries feel safe and that you feel like you're taking care of yourself. But that doesn't mean running away.
Yeah. So I guess I think the responses are so helpful in that getting it right doesn't mean there's no conflict or tension. And
Wouldn't that be fantastic?
Right. Yeah, I know. But it's like, talking about race is so loaded, but we live in all of our relationships with conflict. So why would we want that to be any different? But I do want to move in a little bit into, there are some no's, right? Like, aren't there some general no's that you would say as a person of color, Shanterra, please don't ever do this? So what are those?
Well, one thing that immediately comes to mind is don't use me or a person of color as your check mark or as your way of, let's say we're at dinner and then another person or another stranger says something really offensive, says something racist, and we are terribly afraid of the R word, but says something that is wrong, and don't turn to your Black friend and say, see, she is really upset by this, because that's not cool. That's not cool. And I mean, I even say to parents, you wouldn't do that. Well, if you do that to your children, they would look at you like,
That's a
have you
problem too.
lost your ever loving mind? Like it would
Mhm.
it would not be cool. But for some reason, we think the way to use our friend as the friend as the person of color as a trophy, like, see, this person is feeling this way. Or I talked to my Black friend and they said whatever, da da da. Or, I can't be racist because I have a Black friend. And I hear that a lot. And so those kind of things of using your friend, your relationship, especially the person of color, as a trophy, as a way to magnify your great behavior. Please stop. Let's stop doing that.
Okay, that's not the only thing, though. There's other things that I've heard you say in webinars and other things that I think they're helpful in the sense that they are, I think, microaggressions on your end that many of us don't want to do, but don't know. So in a safe space right now where you guys have been having these conversations, what are some more of those things?
Oh gosh.
We'll
So
start with don't touch your hair.
Please. So that's a big one. Because the amount of times, and I think, especially for Black women watching, I think for the amount of times that Black women's hair is touched without our consent, and this is the deal, we won't ever give consent. We won't ever, ever give consent for a stranger. And even if we're close, like Ross, I don't think you've ever touched.
No, remember when we were writing and we were going over this, and I said to you while we were talking about it, because Shanterra, we have some stories in the book of Shanterra and other women that they don't know have put their hands in Shanterra's hair. And we're talking about this, and all of a sudden I said, I've never even it just was, and Shanterra and I are pretty close. And it's like, how would you ever, have you ever done that with anybody except if you're like fixing their hair, hair, right? If you have, I could see that when that's a consent, like you're fixing my hair, but no, it's not a thing. It's not a thing unless you don't see that person as a person.
Yeah. And so the amount of times that happens, and then there is the idea of and it's usually a white woman getting offended that I have said something. So I have had tears. And this is in the book, where a woman started crying and then another white woman came and rescued her because she was just, the woman who touched my hair without my consent was just curious. And so I think so that's one microaggression that really, really needs to stop. I think another one is asking or saying to someone, oh, you speak really well. Oh, you speak and seriously, this happened a couple of weeks ago. I was watching the US Open, and the guy who won it all from Spain, won it all. And one of the commentators said to him, and he was doing his interview in English, and one of the commentators said to him, you speak such great English. And I was sitting here like, what did you just say? What did you just say? And he said, but can you say something in Spanish? As if the man was juggling 15 tennis balls. Like that's a gift. That's a talent. That's a skill they know. But can you say something in Spanish? Because that would be really cool. That is offensive. So stop asking people, where are you really from? Or you speak such good English. Because listen, we know, and I was with someone a couple of weeks ago who the mental gymnastics that we have to do to make sure that we're presenting ourselves, and I say we as people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, that we're presenting ourselves in such a way that really white people are comfortable and white people are accepting and white people see that we deserve to be in the space. Because if we don't present that way, then white people may feel threatened. And if white people feel threatened, then I'm definitely threatened. So the microaggressions are not just, oh, my bad, because they continue to happen even after you tell somebody that shouldn't be, that they shouldn't do that. It continues to happen.
So you're constantly checking yourself.
Constantly. And I would love to say, oh, not so much because I'm of a certain age and I would love to say that. But I think, especially in the places and spaces that where I get to go, and I'm thankful, I definitely show up as my full self. I am Shanterra McBride. I know that I'm a Black woman living in America. I know who I am. And I also know when I go to certain places, that they are looking at me and they are expecting either certain behavior or they're shocked. So some places I wave because they may think I'm Beyonce. So I just, hey, you know, because I know that, and because we get stuck on, we don't have proximity in relationships, so we only get stuck on what we see on media and television shows, and so we think that, oh, I saw this on the Real Housewives of pick any city, so therefore I'm going to have the same relationship with her. You don't know me. So even so, I would say this, even because I see this a lot with young people, when I go to schools that are majority white, and then it is the opportunity to practice, right? And it's the opportunity to practice what they've seen on social media. So the amount of times I hear, hey, girl, and I'm like, oh, you're practicing. Oh, this is so, hello. I'm not your girl. I'm not your friend, but I know that they're practicing, or it's a certain dialect or a certain slang that they've seen and they don't get to, because no one in their community looks like me. So this is their opportunity to practice. So when I see that with young people, I usually respond with, hello, how are you? And so they're either like, wait, you didn't respond the way. I'm like, because we're not homegirls. You know
Also,
what I mean?
that little pause is really important. That's really, it's powerful.
And
That little pause.
Sue, can I add for our for your audience and for your for our community, and that there are so many parents watching this? I think that there's two things that I want as a white person for mostly white women to understand. One is that the amount of thinking that people of color are thinking about in response, if a white woman, like what Shanterra said a few moments ago, that moment when that white woman put her hands in Shanterra's hair and Shanterra didn't know what it was behind her. So she turns around, she's like, what are you doing? That was a natural reaction that any human being is going to have to their body being touched, right, without their consent. And immediately that initial reaction changed to, oh gosh, now I have to worry about her reaction, because of her reaction, when she gets upset and she gets angry, all of a sudden I have to calm her down, because if she's upset, then I am in danger. And so that's the thing that I want women to understand who have not had this experience, is that the monitoring that people of color are having to do, even maybe in your friend groups with women of color of different ethnicities and races than you, that they might be having to monitor their own feelings and talk to you a bit about it because they're worried about your reaction, is something that I knew before writing this book, but I really, really, really understand now. And the way we talk about microaggressions is that it's like 1,000 small paper cuts, and that women have been telling me about mean girls and their experiences when they were 12, like it was yesterday. The experiences they had when they were 12, they can remember where they were, what was happening, what the person said. Well, that was 12. And that was not to say just, but that was about your experiences as girls. Now I want you to think about that this is happening to them, these kinds of painful, but even more so experiences. And so to say it's not that big a deal is incredibly hurtful. So the third point I just want to say for our group here is that as Shanterra said, kids who don't have a lot of experience with other races, and even some who do, white kids or other kids of other ethnicities will use the N-word. And you as a mom might think, or maybe you say like, okay, that's not okay, because you hear that or whatever. And then your kid like says, Mom, like that doesn't matter. Or you justify for yourself that you don't need to say anything because that's just what kids are listening to. It is incredibly, imperatively important that as white people and parents, that we are very explicit with our kids about, I don't care how much you're hearing it in your music. I don't care how many times your friends are saying it. I don't care what race the child of the person is who's saying it, including if they're Black. You may not say that word. And not only may you not say that word, I'm going to walk you through, or you're going to have to read a short article, short, about the history of that word and how it is used to denigrate and demean people of color. So we have to have this conversation.
What's the article?
Oh, well, we have it in the book, and also we can post something for you, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay. But is it on your site, or like where could someone find it?
Well, I'm actually realizing that you know what's going to happen, Shanterra, is that's in Masterminds and Wingmen.
Yeah.
So it's in that I do talk about it in the boys book, but we definitely can send you a link about that.
We'll put that out on the.
And may I just say something? And I know you have other questions, Sue, but it's amazing to me, and Ross, I'm glad you brought this up, because that word, it's amazing to me how young people especially will find one person like Drake or Lil Wayne who uses it in their music, and then they will say, see, they say it. And then I'm like, but I don't agree with them saying it. And you don't know Drake and Lil Wayne, you know? So it's amazing to me how people will find one person to justify their behavior. But if you have all of these people that's saying, yeah, that's not cool. That's not cool. Stop doing that. It's hurtful. It's violent. Even though you have all these people saying it, one person saying, oh, okay, I say it in my music, so I get to do that. That's that right there is one of the things, especially I think with young people, that, you know, they look for the person to agree with them. So they don't have to change their behavior. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm listening. I'm a teenager, and I'm listening to the music, and I'm singing along with it. Is it easier than we think to know the lyrics and not say that word?
So I think that there is intention behind it. And I was an assistant principal. And so I was the assistant principal at Dances in the Circle with my students, like having a great time. I saw young people. First of all, we didn't play music with offensive language. So let me fall back on that. So administrators, you know, you can find the versions without certain words. Okay. The other part is, I know young people who go to concerts and who know, and I have seen them not say the word. I have seen them be intentional about, I know that this word is good, but I'm not going to say that word, and continue having a good time. I've seen it. So there is intention behind it. So when we say, oh, it can't be done, really?
So the threshold is really low to just hold back on that word. You can do it.
You can do it.
And it's not, you know, just really not about a word. It's this whole thing. And I have been, Shanterra, I know is too, but this whole thing about dismissing racism and the importance of racism by demeaning it with the word woke is so annoying and wrong. And frankly, not only is it annoying, it's wrong and that's another thing, by the way, that if my kids use that word, that I would say, no, you can disagree about whatever is happening, which I'm actually curious about knowing, like, what are you describing, defining, you know, getting frustrated about this, about whatever it is that you've now defined as woke. But that word you cannot use, because for me, words are always so important. And that word is used to dismiss the entire effort of anti-racism. That is what's happening. And it's happening really effectively. And so like the N-word is used to, or like, I'm going to keep saying it, is a display of power over people. Similarly, that woke is such a powerful, the way that it's being demeaned has actually, I believe, become so incredibly powerful to demean the entire effort. So we can disagree about topics, we can disagree about arguments. I would, as a parent, I would be very curious if my kids are using that word, for example, to say, what is it that you're describing, or what is it that's frustrating you? Because they really could have things that are frustrating them in school. There are absolutely 100%. I have had kids who say things to me that I very much disagree with, like, why is this such a big deal, for example? But don't use that word, because that word, then you're getting co-opted by the entire campaign to dismiss how important dehumanization of people is. We're parents. We have to uphold the dignity of people, and that we have to teach them. Or, as I say to my kids, my job is to make you good roommates for other people.
That's awesome. I'm going to say that. Well, I might be too late for that, but anyway, that was awesome.
You're not too late. You're not too late.
Never too late.
So this is really sad for me, because our time is up and I got through 3 questions. But we are going to take this over to our podcast. We're going to schedule that. We'll have a little more time to go in depth. And what a gift you are giving us. Thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I can't believe we're able to have this conversation together. It's really, it's powerful and hopeful, really hopeful.
And so, can I tell all of your people, like, we need you, like Shanterra and I need you. We are in this together and we need you. So, we're here together, but we're on this path together. Even if you disagree with us about some of the things we've said, we are together. We are on the path together to rebuild our communities and our relationships and our neighborhoods and our families around these issues. Yeah. And, I mean, I've watched a bunch of things that you guys have done, and they're so powerful, and there's so much more to say, and hours of conversation here. So I hope this is one of many conversations we have together. Thank you so much. And by the way, guys, we have books. So email editor@yourteenmag.com. Thank you.